I've seen a lot of things in my 20 years with the department. Most of it stays behind at the precinct when I clock out. But some stories follow you home. They sit in the passenger seat of your car. They wait for you in the corner of your bedroom. This one started with a phone call from a retired detective I used to work with back in Pennsylvania. He'd spent years investigating a case that never quite felt closed, even after the handcuffs clicked. It's a story about greed, a woman named Mrs. Montgomery, and a silence that swallowed a small town whole in the winter of 2004. They tell you in the academy that a crime scene is a puzzle. What they don't tell you is that sometimes the pieces are human. On February 11th, 2004, the snow was thick enough to bury a man standing up. I was working out of the Lehigh Valley area. We got a call about a disruption in a wooded area near an old interstate overpass. A stray dog had found something, a hand, or what was left of one. No fingerprints. The skin had been systematically burned away with a torch. The victim had been dismantled with the precision of a butcher, wrapped in heavy-duty plastic, and buried under 300 pounds of livestock feed inside burlap sacks. It wasn't just a murder. It was an attempt to delete a human being from the face of the earth. To understand the end, you have to understand the beginning. In a quiet neighborhood, there was a woman everyone called Mama Rose. She was an old-school entertainer, a retired lounge singer who'd made a small fortune back in the day. She was sharp, wealthy, and alone. She never had children of her own, but she had a heart for the broken. She took in 3 girls over the years, raising them like her own daughters. 2 grew up, got married, and moved out. But the third, a girl named Sarah, was the light of Rose's life. Sarah was bright, heading into her 3rd year of college, working part-time at a local pharmacy. She was the one who stayed when Rose's health began to fail. When Rose passed away, she left everything to Sarah. The 3-story Victorian house, the rental properties across town, and a bank account that most people in that zip code couldn't imagine. But the house had other occupants. On the ground floor, Rose had rented out a large workshop and an apartment to a man named Elias. Elias was a canvas man. He repaired boat covers and heavy industrial tarps. He'd been there for years. He was 28, quiet, a bit of a heavy drinker, but Rose trusted him. Sarah trusted him too. She saw him as a big brother. After Rose died, Elias became Sarah's shadow. He'd help her with the banking, walk her to the pharmacy, and handle the tenants. He knew the codes to her accounts. He knew the balance of her savings. And he knew that Sarah was planning to sell the properties and move to Italy to marry a man she'd met during a semester abroad. Elias wasn't alone in his greed. He had a friend, a man named Miller. Miller used to be a butcher at the local slaughterhouse before he lost his job and started peddling herbal remedies and oddities out of the back of a van. One night, sitting in that ground floor apartment surrounded by the smell of industrial glue and cheap whiskey, Elias showed Miller a bank statement. It's blood money, Elias muttered, his eyes red. Mama Rose earned it in smoke-filled bars. It's dirty. And now this girl is going to take it all to Europe? She doesn't even pay me for the work I do around here. Miller, who knew his way around a blade and had a heart like a frozen pond, leaned in. The law only cares if there's a body to claim the theft, he whispered. If Sarah goes to Italy and never writes back, who's going to come looking? The sisters? They've got their own lives. The boyfriend? He's 3,000 miles away. They planned it for weeks. They bought the feed. They cleared a space in the back of the workshop behind the heavy rolls of canvas. On the night of February 6th, 2004, Sarah told Elias she was finally ready to leave. She'd withdrawn a large sum of cash for her travel expenses, about $15,000. She was glowing, talking about the Mediterranean, about a life away from the cold Pennsylvania winters. Elias invited her down to the workshop to settle the final rent papers. She never walked back up those stairs. They were smart, or so they thought. They knew about forensics. They knew about the CSI effect. After they killed her, Miller used his butcher's tools. They took her apart. They used a blowtorch on her fingertips and her face to ensure that even if she were found, she'd be a Jane Doe. They packed her into the burlap sacks, layering her remains with a heavy grain to mask the scent and soak up the fluids. They loaded the sacks into a van and drove out to the overpass, dumping them in a shallow grave they'd pre-dug in the frozen earth. The next morning, Elias called a local moving company. He told them he was clearing out. He told the neighbors Sarah had already left for the airport. He moved into the upper floors of the house like a king. The police work was slow. Initially, the sisters didn't suspect foul play. Sarah was always a bit of a dreamer. They figured she was just caught up in her new life. But then, the dog found the hand. The coroner in the morgue was a meticulous man. He spent 48 hours reconstructing what he could. Even without fingerprints or a face, there are things that remain. A surgical pin in a leg from a childhood accident. A specific type of dental work. When we ran the missing persons reports against the coroner's findings, Sarah's name popped up. But we needed more. We went to the house. Elias was calm. Too calm. He pointed us toward the sisters, suggesting they had a falling out over the inheritance. He mentioned a missing $15,000. We searched the sisters' homes. We found the cash hidden in the back of a closet in the eldest sister's house. For a moment, we thought we had our killers. The sister broke down, crying. I took it when Mama Rose died. I was jealous, but I didn't hurt Sarah. It was a distraction. A petty theft that almost masked a monstrous crime. But then, one of our detectives noticed something in the workshop. A roll of canvas was missing a large strip, and in the corner, tucked behind a workbench, was a single silver earring. It matched a pair Sarah was wearing in her college ID photo. Then we found the shroud. In a storage locker rented by Miller, we found a blood-stained linen sheet. Not just any sheet, a high-end Egyptian cotton sheet from the Montgomery estate. We brought Elias and Miller in separately. Miller was the first to crack. He wasn't a soldier. He was a coward with a knife. He started talking about blood money and the girl who had too much. He told us how they'd burned her fingers. He told us how Elias had watched the bank accounts, waiting for the right moment to start forging her signature on the property deeds. Elias stayed silent for 12 hours. Then he asked for a drink of water. "She called me brother," he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. "But brothers don't live in the basement while the sister lives in the sun." The greed had rotted him from the inside out. He truly believed he was the victim. He believed that by erasing Sarah, he was simply balancing the books. The trial was a formality. They're both serving life without parole in a maximum security facility in Bellefonte. I went back to that house once, a year later. It was being sold to a developer. The workshop was empty. The smell of industrial glue was gone, replaced by the scent of old wood and dust. People think that killers like that are geniuses, that they have these grand cinematic plans. They don't. They're just small men with small minds who think they can outrun God by burning off a few fingerprints. They forgot that the earth doesn't like holding on to secrets. It eventually pushes them back to the surface. The sisters still live in town. They don't talk to each other much anymore. The money from the estate was tied up in legal fees for years. In the end, nobody got the fortune. The house sits there, a 3-story monument to a girl who just wanted to see the ocean, and 2 men who decided she didn't deserve to. It's February again. The snow is falling outside my window, white and silent. It covers everything, but I know what's underneath. I always know.